Welcome to the Integral Stage Sexuality series. I'm Layman Pascal, and before I host my high-priced week-long workshop on integrative sexuality at a seaside Caribbean resort, I need to make sure I've been fully exposed to the multidimensional richness and profundity of this topic. A topic that most people find deeply physically compelling, emotionally significant, and for some people intellectually fascinating and brimming with spiritual and developmental potential. Here to share the ins and outs of their understanding is ladies and gentlemen, and frankly, whatever else you got, welcome back to the Integral Stages Sexuality sub-series. I'm Layman Pascal, your host, and a reliable source of ontological ASMR, gently whispering cryptically into the liminal spaces between all worlds. Today, we're sitting down with an internet of elegance adjacent to the fearless Dakota Quackenbush, who is kind of a glitch and has been beaming transmission at people for a while on the Elegant Way Substack, including a smart, provocative article entitled Why I Think Polyamory is Bullshit and Why Integration is the New Revolution, subtitled A Post-Polyamory Reckoning, Nervous System Truth, Sacred Devotion, and the Myth of Infinite Capacity. Folks, you can't go wrong with a title like that, so we're thrilled to have her here with us today to explain how she went from very cool, open-minded, sexy girl to sad, regressive trad wife with internalized patriarchy disguised as integrative consciousness. Hi, welcome.
Hello. That one needs like a drum roll and a bunch of flare sounds.
It's weird because I like hate introductions, so I like make this really complicated packed introduction and then rush through it because I have no tolerance for introductions.
Yeah, they're kind of bullshit. Let's just get into it.
Okay, I loved this article, and not because I'm anti-polyamory, but because it's rich with generative nuances and edgy personal growth dynamics and interesting phrasing, which I love. To situate myself for you and everyone who's listening or watching, I've got polyamory friends. It seems fascinating to me. By all means, explore and invent. But I also feel like I often see them sort of drifting into a hungry ghost state that they can't quite diagnose. And
Oh yeah.
personally, I can't tell if that's like something about their deep relation to erotic and intimate energies, or whether they're primed for a change that they can't quite take the next step on, or whether they're just burned out because, frankly, organized sexual multiplicity sounds exhausting and time consuming to me. So that's where I come into all this from. And maybe a good start for everyone else is as a little bit of your story. Like, what drew you to the polyamorous approach, and then what kind of changed for you?
Man, I don't know if we have enough time. Hold on, let me try to figure out how to synthesize this.
Yeah, put that in like 2 sentences for me.
2 sentences? That's a challenge. I was born into the world highly connected to my sacral and craving sex before I even knew what it was. And now, through my own trauma integration process and exploration over the years, I've come to discover that it's polyamory is not bad. It's a beautiful thing. But if you're not trauma integrated, you can't actually have a healthy relationship, whether it's being polyamorous or being monogamous. It's just not scientifically possible.
It seems like there's um, the impression I get, but also from reading your article, that there's people who are on the polyamory side of this, and like you say, are not doing it in necessarily the most trauma informed, healthy, full spectrum kind of way, who nonetheless remain in that condition because they're motivated by a certain kind of idealism.
Mm.
And it's an interesting thing to me because there's a long history of human beings uh, ignoring the inner work they have to do and sacrificing their well-being for idealism or for being of service or for some kind of social performance. But often we think of that as being a kind of rebellion of authenticity and naturalness against a dogmatic structure, but it gets a little bit weird when people find themselves over committed to a structure that purports to be about a more natural and more authentic way of being. Does that make any sense?
It makes sense, but of course we're getting complicated and there's so much nuance. I think the first thing that organically comes up to share is we're animals. Like, we are animals, we are primal, we are wired to use our bodies for magic. And there's so many variables involved in what drives human behavior and what drives our desires. And the truth of the matter is, I think that we're just living in a deluded world full of ego, and that many people who choose to identify with anything, whether it's polyamory, relational anarchy, monogamy, or even things like being asexual, being pansexual, being queer, I believe much of this, it's truth for them, but it's not actual truth. It's truth that is directly dependent to both their trauma integration level and their ego developmental level. And I don't believe until people do their work that they actually know what they want. I don't think it's possible. I think that they tell themselves a story based on the information they have and the conditioning within them, what truth is. But I do not think it's humanly possible to know until you've done your inner work.
And that sounds um, like there's two very distinct phases: having done your work and not having done your work, or right, not being
Yeah.
integrated and then being integrated. Are there two very distinct phases, or is it an endless relative set of steps where you get to think, oh, now I know my truth and integration, and maybe it is an improvement, but relative to your future, still maybe not?
Yeah. So it is a spiral. And like this may be a good moment to bring in, the animate, I call it the animus spiral, right? Like we're talking about Carl here. Like how it works, and I'll use his language, is like you through your whole life go through a series of mirrors. Right? So these are people that you find yourself drawn to. It doesn't have to be romantic, but for the context of the call, that's what we're talking about. And you are basically like you're in a video game. You could bring up Hero's Journey too. You are confronting your bosses in battle. And and the final boss is the boss of sovereignty. And that is like you fighting you. Like the old story is bleeding through. If you're lucky, you have basically like a hall of mirrors of all the different shadow walkers that you've interfaced with, where if you're lucky, you understand that you're the one that is responsible, not the other player in the game. And then you come over the course of your lifetime into deeper reckoning of who you are, what you want, where your ego lies versus where truth lies. And sovereignty is the end, but it's not the end. It is the beginning. It is where you actually get to understand who you are in radical wholeness, and then you can continue to iterate from there. Because I don't believe that if we look at the stages, that, I mean, I could use any of them, but let's just say unitive or ultraviolet. I actually don't think that's the end. There are many other multiverses that are after that that are made available through getting to stage of sovereignty and then going beyond that. It's just there isn't that much statistical data because most people in their lifetime don't even make it through the middle of the tiers. And so there's just not enough science out about the Matrix, which is actually real, ladies and gentlemen, to be able to get this.
I would love a little bit more specificity on how you would define integration, since it's so prominently used in the title and throughout the article. Obviously, you're using some spiral talk. Obviously, there's a connection to Jung. Um, what is
Mhm.
integration for you, such that it could be the alternative to something?
Sure. First, what comes up is radical embodiment. radical alignment. Think like as a human being, you're a Russian doll, and as you do your inner work, the doll just like unfolds, and then underneath there is one doll. Not multiple, there's one, and that one is you. And then from that point forward, you can choose. And so integration is like the pathway of getting so deeply in touch in your patterns and not just noticing them, but then creating a world through the work that you do, which honestly, I believe requires facing hundreds of modalities. That like you can get to a place where you are fully yourself and you no longer follow rules and you become your own system.
It would seem like there's a tremendous opportunity for a lot of people to um, go through that process. How do I want to say this? With communities or networks or forms of living that allow for all kinds of different and diverse forms of interaction, right? Like there's something about the way we normally set up development and integration schemes where there's like a kind of a simplified pseudo self, and then there's a realization of this plurality, and then you're like, oh, now I'm encountering all these different forms, different mirrors, and then there's something on the other side of that. But does it seem to you like there's an intuition in communities like polyamory communities that they're putting themselves in a position that could be of use to that process?
Yes and no. And I'll tell you why. Uh, or one of the traps I see. One, often these communities, the leadership themselves are traumatized. So they can only get people as far as they've gone themselves. So that means top down, there's going to be impact in the field that prevents you from further development. So you may find tribe, but that doesn't necessarily mean integration. And what else do I want to say about this? It's something like there, and also it attracts people who have not done their work, is what I find, because there's this inner desperation for belonging, right? That we all have as human beings, regardless as to how introverted, extroverted we are, whatever. There's this like, I need people. I am a human being. I need humans. But sometimes what can happen, often what happens, is that people spiritually bypass, they go into shadow, they abandon themselves in order to have belonging over uniqueness when I believe that they have to be 100% stacked in order to actually have full integration. And then what you find is the recreation of trauma is created because they haven't done the necessary work to get to the stage to actually do relational practice. And even if they have, they're being tainted from the structure that they're trying to develop within. And then it can sometimes make it harder for the vast majority to actually progress through the spiral, through the integration, if they're not being held in a container that's strong enough to get them through what they need to get through. Or I see piecemeal, right? Where these communities, they have gotten to a certain phase of what's required in order to do inner work, but they can't actually take you beyond that. So then you get trapped in this liminal space where you may have community, but you're still bleeding, you're still in pain, and what happens is the community ends up becoming a band-aid. So you may feel good or even good enough, but there's an internal understanding, even if it's unconscious, that it's not the end. It's only a part of the path. Does that land? Yeah.
Yeah, I see a lot of all these different terms: postmodern, pluralist, green, sort of experiments that are partially realized, right? Where they've like gotten
Sure.
like, oh, here's a bit of it. But there's all these elements missing that would make that a healthy, relatively stable version of a process that people could go into and move through in a reasonable and graceful fashion.
Yeah. What I'll say, a couple things come up. One, data needs to feel. What I see happening in a lot of the kinds of communities that you're talking about is people are still grokking at the level of mentalization. They're not living the product, and as a result, they're not able to ascend and they're not able to support. So they can get people, prepped with vibes, prepped with rigor, with information, with network, social capital, whatever you want to call it, maybe even help people grow, right? Like towards the capacity at which they themselves, the authors, the teachers, the whatever you want to call it, uh, they can get somewhere. But again, we can only get as far as the people who are teaching us. And so long as we're in spreadsheets instead of in our bodies, good luck.
Speaking of spreadsheets, I think one of the interesting hints dribbled through the article is the sense of you as a character trying really hard to organize an effective polyamorous system, even to the point of throwing holacracy concepts at it. Uh, uh, how true is that? And how do you organize relationships in a holocratic manner?
Uh, it's very true. None of it is a lie. There's many ways in which, even as early as a teenager, I started organizing my romantic interests like I was trying to get a return on investment. Like, uh, it's definitely iterated over time. Like originally it was like me with a sponsor, because in my lineage I was in Alcoholics Anonymous for many years, and just taking stock, taking inventory. Oh my God, there's this guy, and this is the way that I feel about him, but things aren't working. What is my part? And if I were to have the relationship with him that I want, what would be required? Right? And if I made a mess, how do I clean that up? So I've been living that since I was about 13, 14 years old already. And then as I got older, like let's just say by mid 20s, I was in holacracy. I was creating spreadsheets. I was building systems using Dunbar method, where I was like, okay, I have thousands of people I know. This is a little too insane. I can only manage so many. How am I going to manage these relationships? And then I'd give them rating scores and I'd be like, well, this one's a 7, and I'd really like this person to be in my top 5. So how do I need to show up differently in order to affect that level of change? And I've just kind of iterated. And now I'm in a place where I'm not really dating because I'm designing. And I know we're here talking about polyamory, but I actually am creating a cultural engine for change. I just haven't released it yet to the wild. And so this is something that I think about regularly, and I don't want to reduce it to something like romantic partnership, because I do believe that because of the work that I've done, I now will be able to reinvent relationship. And so there are many people who I owe tons of gratitude to, who have both supported me personally or supported my line of thinking, but I'm about ready to, dare I say, change the world.
We'll see how it turns out, but it's an
I know,
exciting
who
thing to
knows? I
say.
have no idea. I'll be humble, but like I also I see things in a way that many other people don't, and I don't want to reduce that either. Right? So if my theories are accurate, which is that trauma integration is the real leadership, and what I've synthesized is true, and I have the proper capital and team, which are all coming together right now, then there really is nothing that I'm not capable of doing so long as I protect my nervous system first. Because whatever I design is only as strong as I am.
What goes into that? What's essential when it comes to protecting your nervous system?
Oh my God, there's so many things. I my stack for just my nervous system is like I iterate on it every day. I actually have developed my own system based on the quadrant, which I have like manipulated and woven several other like ways of thinking modalities into it, and I use it with my one-on-one clients and myself, most importantly. But in it, it's everything from like how much water am I drinking? Which supplements am I taking? How many baths am I taking a week? How much sun am I getting? Am I dancing? Am I communicating with my community? Am I meeting with my coaches? Am I being honest and in integrity? Am I praying? Am I writing? Am I chanting? Like the list goes on and on and on. And based on what comes into contact and what my sacred mirrors suggest to me, I am constantly iterating based on what's best for my system. And it's kind of like taking care of myself like I am a car that is well oiled. Like I probably spend on average at least 4 hours a day on self-care. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can work really smart when you take care of your body first. I feel like it's kind of a paradox, and a lot of people have been taught that no, you got to scale, you got to get out there, you're in competition, and there's this like hyper fierce capitalistic blah, that's just like happening. And the truth is that coherence is the new capital. And systems may be slower to scale in the beginning, but if you take care of your engine, that system is going to go a lot further than let's build fast break shit, based on what I'm seeing and living in my own body.
Coherence is the new capital. I like that. It
Yeah.
resonates with a lot of other pro resonance approaches that I'm seeing across the field.
Yeah.
One of the things that was I'm interested in the role that pain plays in all of this. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
listened to that Rachel's song, Polyamory Blues, from out of your article, and that distinction between healing and revealing pain stood out as a really interesting thing, as it does in your article. Uh,
Hmm.
where do you see people mistaking the revealing of pain for healing? And how can the revealing of pain be a more effective part of actual healing?
Man. So this, if you had asked me even a week ago, my thoughts keep changing rapidly on this. So just to anybody who's listening, I'm a revolving myth. And what I say now, I may not believe a week from now, but I promise it'll continue to get more coherent. So, I think that the most important part about being human that is often bypassed is that we need to feel. If you are not feeling, this is what happens. This is what leads to burnout. This is why people destroy relationships. This is why people can't go to sleep at night. This is why we experience the climbing of suicidality rates. Like, this is why we have war, because we're not feeling. And even saying it makes me want to start crying because I'm just feeling the grief of the world and just like how uh, devastating it is to see such sharp men in society trying to steward real world change who refuse to let themselves feel because of the way in which they've been conditioned and programmed and role modeled and raised. It's just excruciatingly devastating. And once people understand that feeling is the real power through lived experience, you cannot unwind that tape. And I think a part of where this is getting fucked up is that people do not have the education. They do not have the resources, right? They are in survival. They are in ego. They are worried about what they're being thought of as. And they don't have safety in their own system, even if they knew how to do this work and had access to doing this work with people who could really bring them through. It is terrifying to feel. Absolutely terrifying. It is not for the faint at heart to become trauma integrated. For the real ones who are teal and above, They know what I'm talking about, even if they won't be honest enough to admit it to other people or themselves. They can feel that in their body. And I think that for those who get the privilege to be able to do inner healing, because I do view it as a privilege based on what our current systems look like in society. Yeah, it's something like, sorry, I'm getting overwhelmed by my feelings. Hold on one second. Um, for people who have the privilege to do this work, you will be able to have a lived experience of reality that's unlike anything that you could possibly comprehend. It's just impossible. And the way I see people fucking it up is that they're bleeding in public. I actually think that often, I will argue 99% of posts on the internet that have anything to do with self-reveal are people in performance over actual healing. In my experience, people can track my history, is that I too used to be in performance. And so I understand this in a lived way that I was like, oh my God, I just did this course. I made 20 grand this month. My partner wants me back. Like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And it wasn't from a lived place of embodiment. I was more embodied. I had done more work, but I was still bleeding at the altar, right? And trying to extract capital based on my bleeding. I think, though, there's a place, though, where you get post-ego, where you can now share your story in a way that's coherent without bleeding. You can share details because you've integrated the shame. Then and only then do I actually believe that people should be sharing their story in the level of detail that some of the people I see in my communities are sharing online. That's not to say I want to shame you, because there is no wrong. It is directly true and right based on your level of development. But once you go through this process, you will look back at your past and go, I did that. I said that. That was a lie. But you can't see what's a lie versus what's truth until you do your inner work. It's just not possible.
What you're calling performance, do you uh, view that as sort of an ancient, ordinary human tendency to be in traumatized, superficial modes, or as something that's been specifically exacerbated by um, a, a new epoch of performance enabling tools? Is it a result of screens and telecommunication and digital? Like, do we have no choice but to become much more performative because we're all in performative contexts?
It's both of those things and so much more. Like, yes, yes, and yes, and yes, and. One second. Just spilled water on myself. Classic. Okay. So, like, um, let me get into this. So, performance, performance, performance. So, I think that one of the most human things is we want to feel seen. I'm sure you want to feel seen. I'm kind of over that. I don't really care about whether or not I'm seen. I care whether or not I am. But for vast majority of people, they want to be seen, felt, treated with reverence, respect, admiration, desire. Everyone is I mean, I don't care how community oriented you are. We are individuals, capital I's, for a reason. And like, because of that, some of it is technological, like what's going on in history right now and how we're all kind of becoming a machine. And some of it is, the earlier thing that you expressed. But we kind of just can't help it. So like, I'm not here to shame anyone. We can't help it. If you want to be with the times, you have to perform in this day and age. You don't really have a choice. If you want to succeed, you don't have a choice. I stirred and didn't really use social media and grew my previous company through word of mouth because of how resistant I am to the dopamine hooks. Understanding that even if I'm providing something of value, through the very act of providing something for of value, I'm actually harming people. Like I am getting them to participate in a culture where they're online reading my writing instead of being out in the world living their experience. And even if I provide them a service that changes their life, that makes them more whole, I'm still simultaneously having them participate in behavior that I don't want any of us to have to participate in.
Problem of insufficient feeling, part of the existential conundrum of the human being. People can play that out in a lot of different areas of life. Like wherever people are doing something, they're also playing out these other more basic issues. Um,
Yeah.
do you think like sexuality themed communities are just one of many kinds, or is there something special about sexuality that makes it uniquely easy to take it up as the special site of identity issues and culture and our restless seeking behavior driven by our inadequate relationship to our own feeling capacity?
If I could just like stand up on a pew and scream, I would probably say everything is a hologram. Everything. So it is not, yes, like we think cult of personality and we think of hyper specific specialized groups like polyamory. Oh, yeah, it's a lot easier to get lost in the madness in a cult versus being at home with your nuclear family. But that in itself is also a cult, a nuclear family. Everything is a cult. Every single organized group is a cult. Sorry, it's a religion, it's a cult, it's a way of thinking, being, operating. I don't think that like gender, political identity, cultural background, I don't actually think any of these things are special. I mean, plenty of people think that they're special. I think that they're just different ways of being, practicing, seeing, expressing. And it doesn't matter what group you're in, you are still needing to feel. And who you are one place is who you are everywhere. So I think that the more complicated a person's background is, the more ripe they are for fragmentation, and often the harder their work is to do. And so, in some ways, I actually think you're better off being a simple muggle. But typically, what I find is like muggles who are more, like white, blue collar, whatever, maybe a lower socioeconomic status. Then the trade-off there is that they don't necessarily have the education or the resources to do the work, whereas like the latter often does. But then they're caught up in the cult of thought. Polyamory is supposed to be this way. Politics are supposed to be this way based on my culture, this is how this thing is supposed to be. And then they get trapped in green meme and, and then they can't, they're stuck. And so like their body feels like there's something different than this. What the hell? I have the juiciest partners. I'm making mad money. I got the dream house. Like, look at me. But then they're crumbling. They're burning out. They're falling apart. They're disembodied. Hell, I have met so many crypto bros that, like, on paper, they're so damn cool. But when you feel their body, you're like, bro, you need to go feel. And you can feel it in the systems they create that even if they're out there saying that they're like anti-capitalism, that they're still breathing it through their product. As much as they're trying to talk away that that's not true, it's still not as integrated as a product as it could be. Sorry, I know you were trying to box me in on the sexuality, but to me, it's all the
No,
same.
no. all, all I need to do is periodically touch the theme of sexuality so that somebody who's
Sexuality,
checking this based
sexuality,
on the idea that's in there, that
sexuality.
it's technically in there, then we can talk about whatever we want. Oh
Okay.
yeah, he said the word sex. That checks out. All right.
Sex, 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 sex. Everyone, have you
All
heard
right.
it? The word sex.
Thank you. That meets our quota. It seems to me like there are elements to the way energy and feeling move in our organism
Mhm.
that are related to um, sort of disinhibiting negative intensities and other ways that involve more deliberate action. Right. I come out of a lot of spiritual community backgrounds. So they'll like deliberate action for me would mean something like directing sensation and attention in various ways or trying to quote unquote move energy around, do interesting things with it. Right. Put more feeling into your hand, for example, than you might ordinarily have. And then there's this other approach, which is uh, it would all organize itself appropriately and multidimensionally if you were not inhibiting various ranges of your own feeling because of their intensities or because of your judgments about them.
Mm.
Um, Always seems to be like both of those are in play together. Do you have any feeling about those two modalities?
It's so much more complicated than that. I mean, we could talk like, oh, I went to energy school, or you could be like, how do I want to put this? Yeah, it's harder for me to organize thought around the secondary thing that you gave because it feels way more mental. And like I understand mental, but because we're going deeper and deeper into the feeling spiral, I like want to be more in something woo in the moment. Sorry, everyone, I can be a little woo. Uh, I'll talk more about what I see, which isn't reduced to either of those two windows. I believe that in order to feel the most important thing, or I'll say one of the most important things that needs to be hit, is you need to heal your mother and father wound. Like if you are not like waking up in the morning feeling deep, deep love for your mom and your dad, you are blocked from becoming. And I've heard it all. I've heard it all from participants in my groups, clients that I've directly worked with, friends, collaborators, like everyone has blocks around that. And you can tell based on a person's relationship to their mom and dad how healed they are. You don't need to look at anything else. If you have enough data to see, do they talk to their dad? Do they talk to their mom, whether or not they're alive? Do they take what they learned, inherited, and not reject it, and synthesize their actual, not just DNA, but the lived expression of their lineage as a part of who they are as a human being? If somebody doesn't, I don't trust them, and I will not have a deep relationship with them unless they're paying me to coach them while we're also building something together. Because to me, you have to feel right? Like now we're getting into like attachment theory, or we could talk like five personality patterns, like who your relationship to your mom and your dad is, and whether or not that's complete or not, loving or not, it doesn't just impact you, it impacts every single relationship in your life for the rest of your life in varying degrees of nuance. And until you address that, I don't care if you like write a letter to your dad and cry and burn it, and then every single day you're reciting to yourself, I love my dad, I love my dad, I love my dad. He treated me with the best energy that he could based on who he was, based on how he was traumatized. Right now we're talking like intergenerational trauma. Like, but until you address that, we could talk energy school, we could talk spreadsheet, we could talk therapist chair, medication, the list goes on and on. Oh, you went to go see a shaman? None of that matters until you address that in my monoculture.
What does addressing that look like?
Well, it's different for everyone. I think here is a moment where it's useful to talk about my own lived experience because I, with my clients, create different pathways to healing the mother-father wound based on who they are and what the context is, right? Are they living or dead? Are they talking to you or not? How much anger is still there? How much sadness is still there? Oh, one of them's healed, but the other one isn't, right? And then I don't just typically address the mom dad, I then address every single romantic relationship you've ever had with any degree of serious, any serious business relationship that you've ever had, any friendships that have felt like pain, but you wish they could be miracles, right? We kind of start at the beginning and then everything unwinds and everything rewires both in the brain and through the cells. But for me, I'll just share a bit more about my own experience. So, my core wound, which thankfully doesn't really breathe in this body anymore, but bled out for the first 30 years of my life, was my dad left me. That was my story. My story was my dad left me. He didn't want me. He never wanted to have me. So therefore, I'm a piece of shit. I rejected myself. I rejected him. And I was in this veil, like this, like, I literally could not see that I was completely full of shit and that the story I'd been telling myself was not true for my whole life. And it negatively impacted everything that I did. Ask any of my ex-boyfriends, they will say that I am insane. And the reason why is because I was recreating this pattern with them, right? Rejecting myself, rejecting them, merging. If we talk about five personality patterns or going aggressive, right? Like this was me. I was just in this like liminal like ego death after ego death, get strong, collapse, get strong, collapse. And it all had to do with my dad. And not my dad, my interpretation of my dad in my mind. And so what I did is in my mid 20s, this is more or less what started my path. I mean, it started way before that. I've been in therapy since I was five. And I grew up with human developmental experts, which I'm very lucky to have had that lived experience. But in my mid 20s, I went to Landmark. And that self-development program was one of the first things that got me to understand, wait, this is the story I've been telling myself? What? Wait, this could like not be true, but it's true based on my historical trauma. It's true. My dad left. Here's the evidence. Here's the evidence. And I called my dad on a break while I was in the middle of Landmark Forum, and I was just like, Dad, this is the story that I've been creating. This is the kind of relationship I want to build with you instead. I choose to have this kind of relationship with you now. And let me tell you, that did not end the cycle. But it started something. It planted a seed. It planted a seed where all of a sudden I was like, wait, there is a possibility that I could have a loving relationship with my dad. There is a possibility that my dad could become one of my best friends and we could become peers. And through the process of several years, I continued to work at it. I'd get stronger, we'd get closer, and then I'd push him away all over again and again and again and again. And this replicated itself in all my business partnerships, all my romantic partnerships, all my friendships. Everything's the same. You just can't see it yet. Sorry. But then I got to a place in the last year, actually last 2 years, where I went through this really intense collapse. I'll call it like one of my final big massive ego deaths where I basically spent 10 months alone. I tried to get a support initially. Nobody could contain me, so I had to learn how to contain myself. And through that process, I started doing some of the deeper work around rewiring my mind, my body. And I basically like recodified my brain and chose to see on a cellular level, my dad loves me. My dad did not leave. My dad and mom separated. He moved to California. We stayed in New Jersey. And he is devoted to me. And this is the language I started speaking to myself as I started coming out of that 10-month cave and doing work with a lot of healers over the course of many months, end of last year, beginning of this year. And you know what happened? Is my literal 3D reality changed. I had a conversation with my dad one day several months ago, and he was like, Dakota, I need to tell you something. And I was like, yes. And he was like, I want you to know that I never wanted to leave. And what was happening at the time, for context, is that my mom's mom was dying, and my mom was trying to raise me and my sister. And my dad, the whole plan was we were going to move out to California to pursue our family company, which, it was an anti-aging and life extension company that we ran for many years. And he needed to be where innovation was. And my mom could not leave New Jersey because of what was going on. And my mom decided that she wanted me and my sister to continue doing our education on the East Coast and to grow up there. And so that's what ended my parents' marriage. And you know what? I had been told a completely different story my whole life by my mom, who was traumatized herself. And I went back to my mom and I said, is this true? And she was like, yep. Everything rewired. And now I talk to my dad as often as I can and my mom every day. And I have healed and I have forgiven both of them, right? But this looks different for everyone. But the biggest stuff that helped me, IFS, somatic psychology, right? And 5 personality patterns. So like if I could make any suggestions of like work that somebody could do right now, if you hit those 3 things and preferably find a practitioner, whether it's me or someone else who gets those 3 things and has gone through the lived experience of creating their own change with their mom and dad through that, then you will be set up for success more than the average bear.
There's an intriguing to me relationship between constraint and unconstraint in everything you're saying. Like
Mm,
even in sort of the like
mm,
polyamory unconstrained, but constraining it by organization. Or you said a minute ago, nothing was able to constrain me, so I had to constrain myself. It's a fascinating, like, how do you get
contain,
the balance? Yeah,
contain.
contain. Which, yeah, there are ways in which they might mean the same and ways in which they might mean something very different. How do you,
Hmm.
um, having lived out being contained and uncontained, how do you get the balance of containment just right so that you have a transformational container?
All right. Some bad news. The systems that exist in society are not built to contain you, baby. Which is why I'm developing a new one. I mean, I can make suggestions. I call it collapsing correctly, right? I think the most important thing is you need a nervous system protocol. You need to put your nervous system first. And you need to listen to your design for being human, at least in the beginning, and that eventually you can be all things everywhere. You need to be aligned. If you are doing anything that you are a no to, as soon as you can, you need to cut that. You need to leave that job. You need to end that relationship. You need to clean up all of your uninitiated tasks, and you need to do it all with class to the best of your ability while you are creating an environment, a laboratory with other people that can support you that are not asymmetrical, who can help you to hold yourself while you learn how to hold you.
It's hard to ask questions after statements like that.
Sorry, I'm single definition. I know my shit and I just
Here's something that comes up for me a lot
Mm.
in terms of um, bringing more coherence to my feelings or in feelings with people. No, turns out I don't care about that.
I mean, immediately what I was just gonna say, even though you didn't even
Yeah.
finish your thought, is like for people who don't know how to bring feelings to other people, once you're ready, there are many different relational modalities that you can practice that will help you to embody this so you can actually know how to know what your desires are, name your boundaries, and build the kinds of relationships that deeply matter so that you can be met and learn how to not just contain yourself, but be contained by other people that can grok you. And some of these modalities, right? I'm sure you already know some of them, NVC, circling, authentic relating, right? There's so many more, but these are some of the practices that I've been trained in. This is what I did for my former company is teaching people how to develop greater social emotional intelligence through creating relational immersive containers where people get to practice sharing their feelings in containers where people are being held, contained, and brought through structures in order to play games that teach you how to become a better game player in the world.
What are you going to call this thing that you do when you change the world?
Well, I'm not telling you yet,
All
but what I will say is that I am designing for a post-trauma Earth. I see, not to sound egoic, but like I'm kind of on some Octavia Butler shit, and I've started writing out the next 100 years. And I imagine a world where it's possible within my lifetime, if I don't become immortal, to basically integrate 15% of the world's population before I die. And so this that's an insane amount of people. And what that would look like in practice is reinventing every single system in society and trauma integrating first our world's leaders that would top down have better impact on how systems are built and held. It would basically be, if this works, it would be the serum to war. And so I want to even just take a moment to take that in because if I'm right, if I'm actually right, and I'm willing to admit that I could be wrong or that I don't have enough information yet in my synthesis of my stack, but it's something that I've now spent my whole lifetime building, whether I knew it or not. Um, this is like world changing. Like this is not small, and it all requires coherent capital and the right partners and the right movements where I'm yellow teaming, right? If we bring in Zach Stein, like I'm yellow teaming, I'm thinking about potential harms. I'm not building for scale. I'm building for coherence based on the current information I have, making sure I get more of the right information to set up myself and everyone that I'm stewarding into success, finding the people that are closer to my level of intelligence that can partner with me instead of building their own things siloed in isolation, and developing something really true, really pure that can speak to eventually, although not beginning, every single level of consciousness, every single socioeconomic status, every single education level. And I'm doing the work to do that, even though I'm starting with a really loud signal that can only speak to certain kinds of people. And if I can really do this, and it's not about me, like I don't like put a mask on my face, change my name a million times. Like I'll be invisible in the back of the room if that's what's required. But if my brain and what it understands can create any sort of a real change, I think that we're looking at systemic redesign. And I'm claiming, which will come out in a song of mine soon, that I'm the aesthetic surgeon of a new earth. Which, sorry, I'm a meme, but like You gotta meme it in order to spread things through culture. That's how memes work.
There's a beautiful audacity to all of this.
Hmm.
But then part of me is like, I wish I was like, actually, I've got a few of your ex-boyfriends right here to speak to the fact that you are insane.
Oh yeah, let them speak. And honestly, like I have shared already with some degree of honesty publicly about some of the things that I've done, although it's been in flowery poetic language. Um, for me, something that really matters is privacy. Like the privacy of my past, the privacy of my clients, the privacy of if somebody gives me information, if they tell me it's half baked or if I can feel it's half baked and they say don't share this, that I don't have the consent to be able to violate. And I do have a story, although I imagine at some point some of my exes would be willing to do interviews with me publicly once they themselves have healed, which is the hardest thing, right? I think that they would admit even through the wreckage and how much harm that we co-produced for each other, that there was heart there, there was love. I'm not a bad person. I was traumatized. Given where I was at different periods of my life with who I dated and how I reacted based on survival, the math is that it was directly proportional to how traumatized I was in my body. And in those moments, it actually felt like I didn't have a choice but to be too much. I did not have a choice but to like scream at someone or cry while they held me in their arms for 12 hours or couldn't pay the bills or, snapped at them because they looked at another woman, right? Like in those phases, I felt based on my stories and my trauma that I couldn't be any different. And now the world that I'm living in, I have men in my life that I talk to every day where we don't fight and we don't compromise and we love. And I didn't know that that level of intimacy was even possible. Oh, we don't even have to process because we just get the other person. What? That is like, that is insane, right? And I don't put my feelings on my close humans anymore. I do my work on my own. I contain myself and I bring them me, loving, devoted me, challenging me, mischievous me, but not evil, but like playful. And now it's like, well, hot damn. Anyways. Mm.
Something about that brings me back to the polyamory article because it, on the one hand, it presents you, right? It presents you both
Sure.
in a moment of considering ideas. It also presents you as a vibe disguised as content. But is there is it also a communication? Like, is it a reaching out to other people who are um, from a slightly earlier chapter of your life or find themselves in that situation? Or are you sending a signal to anyone in particular through that?
Everything I do is a signal. Um, I've thought about this. I've even done math around it. Uh, is there some part of my soul that wishes things had been different with my exes, not because I want to be with them, but because I want for what happened to heal, for them to heal, for me to heal, for the history to heal? Of course, I am obsessed with completion. Am I attached to it though? No, I believe that time will recreate correct itself, and that if I become, as one of my earlier mentors taught me, boundaries are about our behavior. If I become somebody that is an integrity queen, who can own her stuff, who can execute, who can actually design something that creates change from my body out, then I believe, regardless as to whether or not I ever have a friendship, a deep friendship with any of these exes, some of which I do, some I don't, right? Like that will be the evidence in itself. And if they continue to spiral, and create projections, right? As like I move in the directions that I move, I know that it's true for them. It's not true anymore. It's true based on where they currently are and what level of work that they've done. And I can understand, empathize, validate, feel grief. And if and when some of those people want to do that work with me, I am in listening for it and I will meet them in the way that they need to be met. But it's not required for me to continue moving. And I don't need to be seen anymore. I just need to, I am, right? So, did I write it for them? No, absolutely not. Has the thought occurred to me that it could reach them and have some of my exes I actually sent some of my writing to? Yes. But typically it was after I had time to digest what I just wrote, who it's for, why, what it did for my body to write it. And then something in the universe told me this particular ex needs to see this writing because he influenced it. And even if he doesn't want to read it, even if he doesn't want to engage in it, I want him to know that I care about him still. I love him still. I don't want to be with him, but I am owing a tribute to what we went through that helped me to become who I am, because without these men who have stood by me over the years through chaos, through beauty, through learning, through rupture, I would not be the woman that I am. There's no way.
To I am is an interesting thing for me. When I was younger, I there were a bunch of writings and saints and communities where there was this really purist version of it, like you're just supposed to hold very purely to this moment of consciousness, or even to the center subtly from which your consciousness seems to be emerging. And so I dealt with that for a long time. But then one day I remember being on a bus and I was like, no, I totally fucking am. Like there's a different quality to it's a it's a generalized feeling intensity.
Oh,
It's not
turn it up.
mental self-reflection. Uh, so I'm never sure, right? Because seeing differences in the quality of what I am can mean, and then seeing the I am spread through various kinds of discourse and suggestions and communities, you're never immediately sure what kind of I am they're talking about.
So it's funny. I'm in a memory right now of being at Burning Man and being at Dr. Bronner's camp. So I'm thinking like all one, all one, all one, like on the bottle, and just anyways, I could tell you lots of stories. But uh okay, let's get into all one, into what I really want to talk about. I am all one. God, I used to be so judgmental about that. Let me just say that first. Like people would say that and I'd be like, you are vile. Like, what do you mean? You're on some like spiritual pedestal bullshit. Like you don't even know what the hell you're talking about. I am this all one that. Like, ugh, disgusting. Really anti spiritual clothes, spiritual jewelry. Like honestly, spirituality needs like aesthetic surgery. Like, I hope I offend people with this, and I'm sorry in advance. It doesn't mean that I don't love you, but like, ugh, disgusting. I think the word that actually matters here is archetype. I believe that each human being is living out a myth, whether they're conscious of it or not. And depending upon where you are in the spiral, right? You're going to have an access to a different interpretation of who you are, who others are, and what the world is, right? If we go from the inner all the way out to planetary alignment, right? Inner all the way out to universe, you're going to have a different conception. And until you're all the way up there, you cannot actually see, but you're still living out different myths. And some of them may be felt, some of them you may be able to mentalize. And I think that that's the I am. And I don't think that the I am is ever I mean, it is I am because I am all of me, but like all of me is like a million different archetypes that show up contextually in different moments based on who I'm playing with, what the vibe is, what the we space is, right? Um, And I can be all those things at once, but then nobody can understand me. So it's like, does this make sense?
Yeah, it's I am is a more particular form of alignment
Yes.
with a central archetype. It reminds me of the Kabbalistic diagrams. I don't know, you say they've got like the three that are one at the top above the abyss, but
Mhm.
there's this line that goes right up the middle,
Yep, that's
right? You don't
baby
have to hit all
alignment.
these points all the time. That one goes right to the top.
Honestly, and I wish that we would just stop. Not that chakras aren't important or different cultural texts aren't important or whatever, but I'm just like, okay, what are your centers? Get them filled up, get aligned. Get aligned. I'd rather somebody focus on the line than all the details. I think that that would maybe get somebody further than being like, "Ah, my G isn't defined. Oh, my throat isn't defined. Oh, I need to do third eye work now." I'm just like, no, 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 no. Like, just stand and breathe. Stand and breathe. Let's get non-dogmatic. Let's learn how to listen to our inner self. But I don't know what my inner self is. Yeah, because you haven't been listening to it. Start practicing.
Yeah, there's something perverse about a thing where people say they can't do the work that causes it to occur because they haven't already done the work that causes it to occur.
Yeah.
Like I did yoga and meditation teaching for years, and you get people go, "Well, I can't do yoga. I'm not very flexible." I'm like, "That's why you do the yoga. Like, if you were already fine, you wouldn't have to do anything."
Yeah, and then I just hit them with a symbol and I say, and I write down a mantra and I say, tape this to this your mirror at home, create like a photo screenshot of this mantra, and then I want you to recite it as often as can. You say I can't do it. I want you every single day to be flipping that thought. Oh my God, I can't do it. I can do it. I get to do it. I know how to do it. You have to not look at what you think is true and look at what your higher self thinks is true. If there was no ceiling, if there was no limitations, if you were living out your own version of a dream, so long as you're doing the what you're talking about, but I can't move. Like you're trapped. You're trapped in an an ego echo chamber of like fractured mirrors and bullshit and lies.
um, don't worry if anyone's still listening. This is all still definitely about sex, so don't worry.
Yeah, it's
Is
all
there
sexual.
this to me seems like just putting the toe into a water of an extremely multidimensional kind of a conversation, but how do we wrap it up? Is there any last thing? What do you feel is like the final piece of this conversation? Where would we go next if the next thing was the thing that brings it together?
It's funny. I'm like checking. I'm like, is this ego or is this truth? I mean, my body says to work with me because, like, honestly, I've done the math. There are very few living experts that have the distillation of both my training, lived experience, uh, information synthesis. Like, there are coaches out there who can get you pretty far, right? Like Joe Dispenza, Tony Robbins, Joe Hudson, right? Even going to landmark form, but they're not the full stack. And there are going to be other people, some who are already building, some of whom I know, some of who will come after me, who will develop even deeper synthesis beyond what I know how to do. But based on my research and data, there are very few people that can help you to get you as quickly as I believe that I can. And if it's not about how I can support, because it's not about me, I'm just a body that knows how to do a thing, and I want to help you do the thing so you can become all of you and become your 24/7 hype man cheerleader so that you can become the most magical human being in the whole entire world, and just out here creating gods or whatever. But if it's not me, or you can't afford me, or all these different variables, I think it's just easiest to read my writing. You'll see within it, if you go to my Substack, Internet of Elegance, that I cite a lot of the different theorists that have like informed my line of thinking. And this is everything from like Macy and bell hooks to Peter Levine, to Zach Stein, right? Like the list goes on and on. I would suggest reading these things. I would suggest starting a daily meditation practice. The biggest thing I would say, and this is like if I could speak into a megaphone, this is what I would say. Let everything die that is not you. You don't know what those things are yet, but you do know some of them. You can go from A to B. You don't have to go from A to Z. You could start now. Your boss is a dick. Well, first look at, are you being a dick? Probably. But go, is the job aligned? No. How much money do you need to save in order to leave as quickly as possible? Prioritize that. Just as an example. Is your partnership unaligned? Do you find yourself breaking down crying, not being able to communicate, feeling like you're in love with someone that can't meet you? Dump them, right? Like, are your finances fucked up and you know that you need to make a change and deprioritize going to parties in order to gain more capital and pay off your debt? Stop going to the parties. Through putting your healing first, putting your unmet like initiations first, you get to become the party. We don't get to go party when we haven't learned how to take care of ourselves. If you want to become an adult, a devotional adult, I don't even care about adult. Let's just say adult because you're not adult. Most people are not adults. I don't care what the hell they say. You are not an adult if you do not know how to handle your shit. Handle your shit. That's what I would say.
Hmm. Handle your shits, integration and alignment, prioritizing trauma-informed, full stack, radical self-care, and letting everything die gracefully in a world of matrix holograms.
Yep.
All right. Beautiful to talk to you.
Can't wait for more.